Officers Doyle Grant and Travis Cole carried themselves with unearned confidence, believing their badges placed them above consequences. For years, they wielded their authority not to protect, but to dominate. Anyone who looked powerless became a target. No one ever fought back, until Celine Carter, a black woman walking two dogs. They thought she was just another easy target. She looked harmless, ordinary even. But Celine Carter was anything but. A former Navy SEAL, trained to stay calm under pressure, with eyes that missed nothing and instincts sharpened by war. Celine Carter was built for more than street fights. They thought her silence meant fear, that Echo and Nova were just pets. They were wrong. Echo died for the truth. Celine fought for justice. Now it's our turn. Drop your city. Hit subscribe, because the next episode hits even harder. Chapter 1. The Stop. The sun had just started climbing when Celine Carter stepped out of her modest home on the edge of a sleepy neighborhood. The dawn painted the sky with a wash of gray and gold, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalk. Beside her padded two German shepherds, Nova and Echo, their steps light, ears alert, leashes loose in Celine's relaxed grip. These walks were ritual. They gave her a rhythm, something human. But Celine Carter was no ordinary woman trying to reclaim peace. She was a former Navy SEAL, trained to disappear into shadows and reappear in chaos. She had slipped out of war zones, led classified rescue missions, and survived operations that never made the news. But today she walked a neighborhood that eyed her with subtle suspicion. A black woman with powerful dogs in a place that preferred its threats to look different. As she turned onto Parkside Avenue, Nova sniffed at a street lamp while Echo stayed close, his sharp gaze watching every flicker of motion. Celine's grip on the leash was instinctive. She trusted them more than she trusted anyone in the city. That's when the patrol car passed her. Slow, watching. She didn't look at it, just kept walking. But she felt the tension coil low in her spine. Her pace didn't change, her breath didn't quicken, but every trained nerve inside her began to hum. The cruiser rolled 50 feet past, stopped, then reversed. Celine sighed quietly. Not now. The car pulled up beside her and parked. Doors opened. Two officers stepped out. Officer Doyle Grant, stocky with a shaved head and an overconfident gait, and Officer Laura Grant, his leaner, quieter counterpart. Siblings in badge and blood, known around town for using their authority more like a weapon than a shield. Doyle was the first to speak. "Morning," he said, smiling like a wolf. "Beautiful dogs you've got there. Malinois?" "German shepherds," Celine answered, calm. "Military trained?" he asked, too casually. She hesitated. "Just pets." Lara watched without a word, her gaze never leaving Echo's posture. Doyle stepped forward. "They're big for pets. You got ID on you, ma'am?" Celine's voice sharpened. "Am I being detained?" Lara answered. "You match a description." Celine's brow furrowed. "Of what?" They didn't answer. Nova's body shifted, subtle. Echo let out a quiet, warning growl. Celine's jaw tightened. She placed herself slightly in front of the dogs, her voice calm but clipped. "We're on a walk, that's all." Doyle's tone darkened. "Then control your dogs." His hand hovered too close to his holster. Celine's breath slowed. "Back off, you're scaring them." Doyle didn't blink. "Aggressive dogs aren't allowed loose." "They're not aggressive, you are." He moved, fast. Echo reacted. A growl, a surge forward, then a gunshot. Celine's world exploded. The shot missed her. Echo yelped, hit in the side. Celine dropped, spinning into Doyle's stance. Her elbow collided with his wrist. He fired again, wild and low. The bullet shattered concrete. She grabbed his arm, twisted. The gun clattered to the ground. Nova lunged at Lara as she reached for her weapon. Celine moved with precision, disarming, blocking, de-escalating in half-second intervals. Lara backed off, shaken. Doyle stumbled toward the car. Celine crouched beside Echo. Blood, but not a kill shot. He was breathing. Sirens were distant but growing louder. Porch lights were flicking on. A man filmed from his driveway. Celine yanked the body cam off Doyle's chest and ripped the drive from its mount. He groaned. "You attacked me?" "No," Celine said, eyes burning. "You profiled me. You provoked my dogs. You pulled first." She clipped the drive to her belt, tugged Nova's leash, and with Echo limping at her side, vanished into the misty morning streets. Behind her, red and blue lights painted the neighborhood in panic. But Celine didn't run out of fear. She ran because she knew exactly how stories like this got rewritten, how women like her disappeared beneath headlines that said aggressive, non-compliant, dangerous. This time she wouldn't let them. She had evidence, and this time she would write the ending. Chapter 2. The Safe House. Celine didn't go home, not after what just happened. She moved through the city's skeletal back streets like she used to move behind enemy lines, quick, deliberate, invisible. The dawn stretched behind her like a memory she didn't have time for. Echo limped beside her, each step wincing with pain. Nova flanked them protectively, her body tense and alert. Celine's sweatshirt clung to her back, soaked with sweat, and blood streaked her left sleeve, the strip she'd torn off to wrap Echo's side. The bullet had grazed muscle but hadn't punctured organs. Lucky. Still, the dog was losing blood. Fast. She ducked through a rusted alley gate and tapped a burner phone she'd kept in her vest for months. It only had one number saved. Gina. It rang 3 times. A voice answered, sharp, cautious. "Celine?" Celine didn't waste time. "I need a safe house. Echo's hit. They'll twist the story by noon." "I've got a warehouse in Dockside," Gina said. "You remember the place?" "On my way." The warehouse stood behind a shipping yard, shrouded in fog and flanked by dead freight trucks. Celine knocked twice, waited, then knocked once more. The steel door opened. Gina was there, hood up, laptop in hand, gun at her hip. She stepped back. "Jesus, what the hell happened?" "Officer Doyle Grant happened." Gina helped ease Echo onto a table lined with a survival blanket. The dog whimpered, but stayed still. Nova sat beside him, eyes locked on Celine's every move. Celine peeled back the makeshift bandage. "Through and through, clean, but deep." Gina already had a med kit open. "You treat him. I'll pull surveillance." As Celine worked, stitching with field precision, Gina's fingers flew across her keyboard. Screens filled with local police chatter. One body cam feed flickered, then failed. "Looks like Doyle's cam malfunctioned," Gina muttered. Celine pulled a USB drive from her belt. "I have the real footage." Gina plugged it in. They watched it together. Again. The silence that followed wasn't just fury. It was calculation. Gina turned to her, voice low. "This wasn't a stop. It was an activation." Celine narrowed her eyes. "You saying this was Echo Protocol? I thought it was dead, scrapped years ago." "So did I," Celine said. "Then why did Doyle say my name like it was on a list?" Gina pulled up an encrypted message thread from a secure server. She'd been tracking whispers for months, flagged terms like reactivate, containment, and worst of all, Carter-class interdiction. "They want you disappeared, Celine." Celine stood, staring at Echo's breathing. "I've been disappeared before. This time, I disappear them." Across town, inside a concrete government shell with no signage and no visible cameras, Doyle Grant sat in a gray interrogation room. Not under arrest, under review. His arm was wrapped in gauze, his jaw bruised. He kept repeating the same line, "She attacked." Her dogs were aggressive. Opposite him sat Maris, a man with no badge and no rank, just a clipboard and a stare that made seasoned agents sweat. "You failed to neutralize," Maris said flatly. "She was faster than anyone I've seen." "She's Carter," Maris replied. "And you poked her." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, photos of Celine's service, mission logs, redacted pages, a note handwritten in blue ink. Remove the operator. Remove the witness. Doyle paled. You want her silenced? You failed that already. Now we contain the fallout. Back at the safe house, Gina turned her laptop toward Celine. There's one name at the bottom of the Echo protocol reactivation, one that didn't match before. Celine stepped closer. Jordan Tate, her mentor, her former commanding officer, the man who trained her in tactical silence, who taught her to trust orders. Celine's jaw tightened. If he signed that order, it means he knew I was a target. Gina nodded slowly. You were never supposed to survive long enough to find that out. Celine turned to Nova, who was already on her feet, alert. Echo lifted his head. They were ready. The war hadn't ended years ago. It had just gone underground. Now, it was coming up for air. Chapter 3. The name. Celine didn't sleep. She sat against the warehouse wall, legs outstretched, Echo's head resting gently on her thigh. Nova lay just a few feet away, ears twitching with every passing creak in the steel rafters above. Outside, the city buzzed in the distance, but in this forgotten corner of dockside, silence reigned. Her mind raced, calculating. The name Gina had shown her wasn't just a name, Jordan Tate. Celine had trusted him once. More than that, she had modeled her early career after his. He was one of the few officers who'd treated her like more than just a tool, who taught her to anticipate the battlefield and read the lines between orders. But if he was behind this, if he'd signed off on her as a target, that meant betrayal didn't just come from the streets. It came from the top. Gina's voice cut through the stillness. I found a pattern. Celine looked up. 3 other veterans, former special ops, marked unfit in the last 12 months. All disappeared quietly. No obits, no news, 1 car crash, 1 overdose, 1 suicide by cop. Celine frowned. You think they were part of Echo too? Not confirmed. But look at this. Gina spun the screen. They all trained under Tate. All had clearance levels above Tier 3. All were reassigned to domestic security after deactivation. And all of them died the same year he got promoted to counterintelligence liaison, Celine muttered. Exactly. Celine stood, stretching her sore shoulders. Tate's not cleaning up loose ends. He's erasing anyone who knows what Echo did. Which means we've only got one option. Celine raised an eyebrow. We go to someone higher. Celine shook her head. There is no higher. He's embedded. Gina hesitated. Unless we go outside the system. Celine looked at her for a long moment. Press? Gina nodded. Or whistleblowers, civilian oversight. There's one name I trust, Detective Lee Darnell, Internal Affairs. She tried to expose Echo 5 years ago, almost lost her badge for it. Celine considered it. Still working? Transferred, doing cold case reviews now. Celine moved to the work table and unrolled an old duffel. Inside were the tools she thought she'd never use again. Gloves, comms, a suppressed sidearm, encrypted drives. Let's pay her a visit, she said. Detective Lee Darnell was exactly where Gina said she'd be, tucked in a basement office 2 stories beneath the Municipal Records Division, buried under stacks of neglected reports and ancient metal cabinets. Celine didn't knock. She entered silently, Nova close at her heels. Darnell looked up, startled for a second, but not scared. Carter, she said, I wondered when you'd show. You know who I am? I used to know what Echo Protocol was, until it got wiped from every file in the system. But ghosts leave footprints. Celine sat across from her. Then you know I'm not here for help. I'm here for a fight. Darnell nodded slowly. And I have receipts. She opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder. Inside, fragments of reports, field memos, images, One of Celine standing beside Jordan Tate on an overseas airstrip, arms crossed, wind in her short-cropped hair. "You were his star," Darnell said, "until you found out what Echo was really doing." Celine didn't flinch. "And now he's using the same playbook to erase me." Darnell leaned forward. "Then let's burn the playbook." Back at the warehouse, Gina paced, phone pressed to her ear. She was talking to a contact in Berlin, an ex-journalist turned open-source investigator, someone with enough reach to get the story out if they moved quickly. Celine and Darnell returned as Echo rested quietly, bandage secure. "We have a window," Darnell said, "but it's narrow. Once Tate knows we're poking around, he'll move to contain." "Then we hit him first," Celine replied. "Digitally, we leak every document, every file, every whisper, and we draw him out." Gina nodded. "I'm already prepping the blast." Nova let out a low bark, as if in agreement. Celine looked at her team, small, unarmed in the conventional sense, but dangerous in all the ways that mattered. They didn't have a unit, they didn't have backing, but they had proof, and that was enough. At 3:14 a.m., a digital package was uploaded to 3 secure servers across Europe. One click from Gina's laptop would activate it. Celine stared at the confirmation code, then typed a message. "Jordan, I'm not running. You trained me too well." She pressed send. Chapter 4. No more shadows. The warehouse was quiet. Too quiet. Celine sat by the open skylight on the second level, scanning the city skyline through binoculars. The night air was sharp, tinged with salt and the faint stench of industrial waste. The view stretched all the way to the precinct towers, where Jordan Tate still played his game in the shadows. But the shadows were thinning. Downstairs, Gina was prepping the release files, her fingers typing like they were on fire. Beside her, Darnell sorted through what little remained of her physical archives, documents she'd risked her career to keep hidden. Celine checked her watch. 4:07 a.m. "I triggered the message," she said without turning. Gina looked up. "You think he'll bite?" He always did like to handle things personally. There was a pause, then Darnell's voice. "And if he sends someone else? Then we make sure they leave with a message." Nova growled softly near the door. Echo stood now, weak but mobile, his wound healing faster than expected. Celine had already outfitted him with a lightweight protective harness, black nylon reinforced with Kevlar. Not that Echo needed armor. His presence alone was enough. A small red LED blinked on Gina's laptop. "Someone accessed the dead drop," she said. "We're live." Celine stood. "Time to move." Across town, in a high-rise office bathed in soft blue light, Jordan Tate sat behind a reinforced glass desk. The file he held in his hands was a printout, her message. "I'm not running." He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just picked up the receiver. "Activate Black Echo." Back at the warehouse, Celine and Darnell checked gear one last time. It wasn't much. Just a short-wave transmitter, 3 burner phones, 2 smoke bombs, and a pistol with 4 spare mags. "I'm not trying to win a war," Celine said as she zipped her jacket. "I'm just trying to drag the truth into the light." "You're about to do both," Darnell muttered. Gina pushed a flash drive into Celine's palm. "It's got timestamps, location pings, encryption keys. If they catch me, that drive makes sure the whole thing keeps moving." Celine nodded, tucking it into a side pocket. Then, without warning, Nova barked sharply. Once, Celine snapped around. 3 vehicles, no sirens, headlights cut. She turned to the others. "Move to fallback point, now." "Where do we meet?" Gina asked, already gathering her laptop. Celine's eyes narrowed. "If I'm not there in 20, go to Plan Echo Red." Darnell blanched. "That's burn and wipe?" Celine didn't answer. She was already descending the ladder to ground level. Nova followed. Echo limped beside her, ready. When the first door was kicked in, Selene was waiting. She used smoke to cover the dogs, disabling the first two agents with quick, fluid strikes. One went down with a collapsed shoulder. The other, Echo handled, teeth and fury. The third came through with a taser. Selene took the hit. Voltage lanced through her torso, locking her limbs. The agent stepped closer, confident. Selene's eyes, fogged with pain, focused on one thing, his stance. Off balance, weak left side. She shifted weight, spun, and swept. He dropped like a stone. The taser hit the floor and skidded. Nova lunged past her, into the hall, chasing the last figure fleeing. Selene forced herself to her feet, blood ringing in her ears. She'd counted 3. But a fourth shadow moved from the far end of the corridor, taller, slower. She knew that gait. Jordan. He stepped forward, face unreadable, no weapon drawn, just a look in his eyes like regret worn down into something darker. "You could have stayed hidden," he said. "You could have stayed human," she replied. "I gave you a life," he said. "You trained me for this," she countered. Silence. Then Selene tossed something to the ground between them. A flash drive. Jordan looked down. "What's this?" Selene raised her voice, just enough to carry. "Insurance!" As the word left her lips, Echo barked, sharp and deliberate. On cue, from a rooftop across the yard, a small drone zipped into view, its lens flashing, recording, streaming. Gina's voice crackled in Selene's earpiece. "We're live to over 40 nodes. 10 mirror links, 5 countries." Jordan stepped back. For the first time, his mask slipped. "You don't know what you've done," he whispered. "Oh, I do," Selene said. And with that, she stepped backward into the smoke, disappearing again. Not running, just choosing the next battlefield. Chapter 5. The Fire Line. The drone footage was everywhere within hours. At first, it trickled into closed forums and whistleblower groups. Then it spread. Reddit, encrypted Telegram feeds, dark web mirrors, eventually making its way to a small but persistent journalist collective out of New York. The video showed everything. The ambush at the warehouse. Echo and Nova defending with precision, not rage. Selene's restraint, even under threat. And Jordan Tate stepping from the shadows. Unarmed, but clearly orchestrating the raid. In less than a day, hashtags began to trend. Echo Files. Selene Carter speaks. Targeted by Tate. Selene didn't watch any of it. She was already moving again. The safe house had been burned. Not literally, but operationally. Too many eyes. Too many ears. So Darnell secured a fallback location. An abandoned ranger station outside the city, tucked near the tree line of a forgotten national park. It was cold, bare, but quiet. Selene liked quiet. Gina, on the other hand, hated it. She paced constantly, clutching 2 burner phones and watching multiple mirrors of the uploaded footage. "They're reacting faster than I expected," she said. "Scrubbing threads, shadow banning posts, even pushing counter-narratives already." "Expected," Selene muttered, sharpening a combat knife against a steel block. "They're calling you mentally unstable, claiming you went rogue after a psych eval flagged combat trauma." Darnell scoffed from the corner. "Classic playbook." Selene said nothing. Nova was curled in the corner. Echo stood near the window, still limping slightly but back to full alert. His eyes tracked shadows beyond the tree line like he knew more was coming. Gina turned. "Selene, what do we do now?" Selene looked up, her voice steady. "We finish it." At that same moment, Jordan Tate stood in a private chamber inside a federal building known only by coordinates. His suit was crisp, his expression flat. He wasn't speaking to subordinates anymore. He was speaking to handlers, old ones. Voices filtered through a secure channel. British, Eastern European, some American. "She has the file. The dogs are trace-trained. You taught her too well. She must not reach phase 3. Tate spoke at last. "She won't." "You've said that before." He inhaled sharply. "This time, I'm taking the field myself. Back at the station, Celine stood before a corkboard lined with hastily printed documents. Photos, timelines, redacted mission orders, maps. At the center, a black and white scan of the Echo Protocol Charter. One clause was circled. If ever compromised, protocol shall be neutralized by its own assets. Celine tapped it. He's going to try to make me the scapegoat. Final execution clause. Gina stepped forward. Then we go first. We expose the chain above him. Celine looked at her. We don't have access. Darnell raised a brow. Maybe you don't. But I still have a ghost passcode, and I know a back door into internal affairs that was never deactivated. Celine paused. You're telling me we can breach the federal server? No, Darnell said. I'm telling you we can rewrite the official version of Echo. Silence. Then Celine said, Get ready. That night they moved in silence. Darnell worked from a remote uplink on the ranger station's roof. Gina sat inside, hands moving faster than Celine had ever seen, slicing through encryption and quietly hijacking the system that had marked Celine as expendable. At 2:11 a.m., Celine stepped outside. Echo followed, Nova beside him. The forest was dark, but something in the wind had changed. A presence. A scent. Celine knelt beside her dogs. We're not done, she whispered. Then she stood, eyes on the horizon. Because somewhere out there, Jordan was coming. And this time, she wouldn't vanish. She'd wait. She'd fight. And when it ended, when the dust settled, only the truth would remain. Chapter 6. The Trap. The air in the ranger station grew heavier with each passing hour. Celine had cleaned her weapons twice, rechecked the perimeter sensors, reviewed the breach plan with Gina and Darnell until none of them could recite it wrong even in their sleep. Now she waited. Waited for the move she knew would come. Jordan Tate never played defense, and he never delegated revenge. Inside, Gina hovered near the radio. Signal distortion just pinged on the eastern ridge. Darnell moved to the laptop. Thermals are scrambled, could be drones. Celine grabbed her rifle and a pair of NVGs. Or it's him. Nova and Echo stood like shadows beside her, eyes fixed on the window. Nova gave a low warning bark. Celine tapped her earpiece. Time to finish what he started. Jordan didn't come alone. He brought 5 men, none in uniform, all ex-intel. One moved like a recon sniper. Another scanned rooftops with predator eyes. This wasn't a raid. It was a kill mission. But Celine had set the field. Motion sensors buried in the ground, tripwires with flares, choke points mapped with field precision. Gina and Darnell were already en route to the satellite van hidden half a mile out. The trap was set. Now it was just a matter of when. Celine crouched beneath the collapsed cabin porch. Echo slipped into the shadows, a ghost with fur. Nova flanked the rear. She watched them come in, silent, no light, no chatter, just shadows sliding through the trees. Jordan moved with practiced calm. His rifle was slung, not drawn. His mouth set in that same expressionless scowl she remembered from her last op years ago. Then he stepped into the ring. Celine moved, quick, clean. Her knee struck one operative in the chest. He hit the dirt before he could shout. Nova took the second one's legs from beneath him, dragging the man into the trees like prey. That left 3. One rounded behind the structure. Celine caught his outline in her scope and fired once. A trank, not a kill. Jordan turned sharply and smiled. There she is. Celine rose from cover, gun aimed. Drop the weapon. Jordan didn't flinch. Still giving orders? Still breathing, she replied. He took one step forward. Echo leapt from the brush, growling, fangs bared, forcing Jordan to halt. I trained you better than this, he said. No, Celine said. You trained me for this moment. She tossed a small device to the ground between them, a pulse-triggered jammer. Suddenly, radios crackled static. GPS feeds died. His comms were blind. "You're done," she said. Jordan's smile dropped. "What do you want, Celine?" "The truth. Public. Raw. Undeniable." He reached for his sidearm. Celine fired. The bullet hit his shoulder. Not fatal, but enough to drop him. Jordan groaned, falling to his knees. Celine moved forward, Nova and Echo circling like wolves. "You erased my life," she said. "Now I erase your control." From behind her, Darnell's voice rang through the comms. "Upload complete. Every file, every name, every mission. It's done." Jordan's eyes widened. "You don't know what you've done. There are layers above me, people who don't even have names." Celine leaned in. "Then they can come find me." She stepped back. "But I won't be hiding." 30 minutes later, Gina's drone hovered above the clearing, streaming footage of Jordan Tate in restraints, guarded by Celine's 2 dogs, his weapon tossed at his feet. The internet exploded. Celine Carter was no longer the hunted. She was the story. And for the first time in years, her name was hers again. Chapter 7. The Fallout. By dawn, the world had changed. Jordan Tate's face was splashed across every news feed. A decorated intelligence officer turned rogue asset, captured by the very woman he had once trained, and tried to erase. The footage of his detainment, of Echo and Nova standing guard like sentinels carved from justice itself, had gone viral. Celine Carter trended globally, but Celine didn't celebrate. She sat on the porch of the ranger station, rifle across her lap, eyes scanning the tree line out of habit. Echo lay beside her, head on his paws, ever watchful. Nova sat just to the right, tail thudding softly whenever she shifted. Inside, Gina fielded calls from journalists, whistleblower lawyers, and 3 major news networks. Darnell was already coordinating with internal affairs. She had reactivated her credentials and was now leading an independent oversight task force. "You lit a match, Celine," Darnell had said. "Now the whole system's on fire." But fire attracts smoke. And in that smoke, danger still waited. From the wreckage of Echo Protocol, names had surfaced. Officers, handlers, financiers, operatives. Most had vanished years ago. But a few? They were still in play, embedded, quiet, watching. Celine knew taking Tate down wasn't the end. It was just removing the keystone. The architecture of abuse was still standing. That night, they moved again. The ranger station, compromised by exposure, had become a symbol. Reporters and camera drones were circling overhead. Every major network wanted a word with the soldier who refused to disappear. Celine refused them all. Gina drove the van this time. Darnell rode shotgun, fielding encrypted messages from D.C. Celine sat in the back with the dogs. She didn't speak much, only watched. Because now that the war was visible, the real game was beginning. They reached a secure location outside the city, a disused military training site Gina had acquired under a fake foundation name. From the outside, it looked like a condemned barracks. Inside, it had been turned into a war room, monitors, signal boosters, a wall of screens tracking government feeds, criminal probes, and financial disclosures. "This is home now?" Celine asked dryly. "For now," Gina said. "Long enough to finish what we started." Darnell dropped a new file on the table. "The investigation's expanding. Dozens of sealed case files are being reopened. And Tate? He started talking." Celine raised an eyebrow. "Names?" she asked. "Plenty," Darnell replied, "including someone we never expected." Gina turned the monitor. A face popped up. Director Evelyn Voss, National Intelligence, Classified Clearance Level 6, last seen in a Senate hearing denying the existence of off-the-books programs. Celine's expression turned to stone. "She greenlit the reactivation?" "According to Tate, yes," Darnell confirmed. "And more than that, she's building something new." "Another Echo?" Gina asked. "No," Celine said quietly. Something worse. That night, Celine stood under the open sky behind the compound. The stars were cold and distant, like they didn't care what happened down here. She felt Nova nudge her knee, then Echo settle beside her, warm and still. She took a breath. Jordan Tate was gone. But the system that made him? Still breathing, still watching, still dangerous. Celine clenched her fists. She wouldn't run. She wouldn't rest. She would finish what he started, but she would finish it her way. Chapter 8. Loose Ends. 3 days after the arrest, the world hadn't calmed down, it had caught fire. Media outlets argued over how deep the corruption ran. Congressional hearings were rushed. Headlines screamed, Echo Protocol was real. Veteran framed by rogue intelligence chain. Dog unit prevents assassination. But for Celine Carter, it wasn't noise. It was confirmation. They weren't ignoring her anymore. Now they were scared. In the converted barracks, Darnell slapped a folder onto the table. Tate's flipped. Celine, seated with Echo at her feet, glanced up. He gave us 4 names, Darnell continued. 3 confirmed. 1's off-grid. Who's the worst? Celine asked. Darnell didn't hesitate. Clay Maddox, private security contractor, ex-CIA. Tate says he was running foreign wet work under the cover of Echo Protocol's closure. Celine leaned forward. And he's here? Last trace places him in state, private farm, high perimeter security, but no official protection. We hit fast, he won't know what hit him. Celine stood. Prep the route. I'll go tonight. Gina raised her head from her laptop. You're going alone? I'll take Nova, Celine said, patting the dog's flank. Echo stays here with you. Echo huffed, clearly not thrilled with the arrangement. Celine smiled faintly. We've got more than one fight to finish. The road to Maddox's compound was long and rural, winding through pine forest and farmland until finally opening up to high chain-link fencing and spotlights mounted on poles. Nova sat upright in the passenger seat of the truck they'd acquired, a beat-up forestry department vehicle from the impound lot. Celine slowed the truck as she reached a clearing just beyond the eastern fence line. She parked in the shadows, silenced the engine, and slid out into the darkness. Nova followed like a shadow. The compound was a fortress, but not impenetrable. Celine mapped the exterior with infrared. 2 roaming guards, 1 camera grid, no dogs, rookie mistake. She signaled Nova forward. The shepherd slinked under a culvert and waited. Celine climbed the exterior scaffolding of the old grain silo to reach a second-story office window. Inside, Clay Maddox was reviewing a stack of documents, his back to the window, a pistol on the table near his hand. Celine stepped through the window like a ghost. Evening, Clay. He spun, reaching for the weapon, but froze when he saw Nova perched silently at the door, growling low. Celine moved forward, gun already drawn. Don't, she warned. Maddox lifted his hands, the cocky smirk fading. You're a ghost. I'm a reminder, she said. One you can't scrub from the record. He glanced at the papers. So this is about Echo. This is about justice. She threw a flash drive onto the table. That's everything you did under the protocol, compiled, corroborated, ready to go to D.C., The Hague, or hell. Maddox studied her face, then shrugged. Then what are you waiting for? Shoot me. Celine didn't flinch. Death's too easy. I want you alive. I want you in front of every camera, in every court, sweating under oath. Nova growled again. Maddox tensed. You think the system will protect you? He spat. You think this gets fixed because people see your little video? Celine stepped closer. No, she said, but they're seeing me now. And that changes everything. Hours later, back at base, Celine dropped the drive on the table beside Darnell. Clay Maddox is in custody. Everything he had is on there. Darnell nodded slowly. We're dismantling the machine, 1 bolt at a time. Gina smiled. And people are listening. Celine looked down at Echo, then over to Nova, who had already curled into his blanket with a soft sigh of relief. Celine exhaled. There were more names, more missions, more ghosts to confront. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel like one of them. She was still standing, still fighting, and she wasn't alone. Chapter 9. The Burn List. Rain lashed the windows of the compound. Thunder cracked in the distance, rolling low like a warning that hadn't yet decided who it was for. Celine Carter stood at the center of the operations room, the walls lined with printed documents, satellite maps, and red string lines connecting faces to file numbers. The names Tate had given them were only the beginning. What they now had was the burn list. A black ledger surfaced from a former Echo handler's archive, decrypted by Gina after 24 sleepless hours. It wasn't just a list of operatives. It was a blueprint of how the program survived in the dark. Bribes, silences, murders. Celine didn't flinch as she flipped through the printed pages. Some of the names she recognized from the field. Others had been ghosts, paper pushers who pulled strings from office towers far from the blood. "This list changes everything," Darnell said, pacing near the door. "There are judges on here, mayors, 2 former senators. It's not just Echo, it's everywhere." Celine didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached for a small thumb drive marked only with a red X. "This one," she said, tapping the drive. "What's on it?" Gina glanced up from her terminal. "Surveillance logs, years of data, movement, transactions, communications between active agents and civilian intermediaries." "In English?" Darnell asked. "It's a roadmap," Celine answered, "to everyone keeping the machine alive." Later that night, she sat outside with Nova and Echo. The storm had passed, but the wind still bit. Nova rested her chin on Celine's boot. Echo's eyes tracked every rustle in the trees. Celine stared into the distance. "I used to think the worst thing was being hunted," she murmured. "But the truth is, being invisible is worse." She looked down at the dogs, loyal, relentless, and never silent when something was wrong. "I'm not invisible anymore." Echo let out a quiet huff. Nova nudged her knee, and that was enough. They went public again the next morning. This time, not with drone footage or body cam leaks. This time, Celine stepped into the light, wearing a dark tactical jacket and standing in front of an American flag, faded by time and irony. She addressed the camera directly. "My name is Celine Carter. I served as a Navy SEAL for 12 years. I was part of classified operations I can never fully disclose. But I will say this. What we uncovered wasn't terrorism. It was treason. And the people responsible didn't live in bunkers. They signed contracts in boardrooms and filed fake records in D.C. She paused. Echo sat beside her, Nova on the other side, both still, watching. "This is the burn list, and I'm not releasing it to incite fear. I'm releasing it because accountability can't survive in the dark. The system didn't just fail me, it failed all of us." She turned, placed the drive into Gina's hand, and nodded. Within seconds, the files were live. What followed wasn't chaos. It was reckoning. Agents resigned, politicians ran for cover, legal teams scrambled to rewrite narratives, but the people, millions watching, weren't looking away. They weren't following hashtags anymore. They were following her, Celine Carter, the soldier who survived the system, who dismantled it with her bare hands. That night, the compound buzzed with activity. New allies arrived, fired investigators, disillusioned whistleblowers, even a pair of retired journalists who once covered Echo's denials and now wanted to correct the record. Celine stayed quiet through most of it, sitting with Echo's head in her lap and Nova curled by the fire. She didn't need the noise. She'd lit the match, and the fire would take care of the rest. Chapter 10. No way back. The compound didn't sleep anymore. What started as a hideout had become something bigger, an intelligence hub, a broadcasting node, and, whether Selene wanted it or not, a resistance symbol. New faces passed through the hall every day. Some offered files, others brought warnings. But all of them came for the same reason. Selene Carter had done the impossible, and now they wanted to help her finish it. Darnell stood beside the projector screen, arms crossed, her face tense. "They're going to retaliate." Selene didn't blink. "They already did." "No," Darnell said. "I mean bigger. They can't kill the story, so they'll go after the source." "Me?" Darnell nodded. "And your sister. And anyone linked to Echo." Selene turned to Gina, who looked up from her encrypted laptop. "How exposed are we?" Gina exhaled. "Our main channel is protected, but we've seen probes. Someone's trying to triangulate the upload locations. They haven't cracked it yet." "But they will," Selene said quietly. "They'll come in silence," Darnell added. "No official orders, no markings, just a clean sweep and a quiet report to close the book." Selene looked at her dogs. Nova had stood up already, tense and alert. Echo didn't move, just blinked slowly, like he already knew. "Then we make it loud," Selene said. That night, Selene and Darnell laid out the maps. The location, a black site facility once rumored to be used by Echo Protocol for deep processing. It was buried in the mountains, officially condemned, but Gina's data pings told another story. "There's movement," Gina said, tapping the satellite overlay. "Thermal signatures. Someone's using it again." Selene's jaw tightened. "That site was never for processing, it was for erasing." Darnell looked up. "You think they're holding Echo operatives there?" "I think they're silencing them." "And you want to go in?" Gina asked, already knowing the answer. Selene nodded. "I'm not leaving anyone behind. Not again." They moved before dawn. Selene, Darnell, Nova, and Echo. Airdropped by an unregistered chopper Gina had borrowed from a sympathetic airfield manager, they touched down in a clearing 2 clicks from the site. The mountain air was thin, sharp, but Selene breathed it like it grounded her. They moved as one. Nova flanked left, Echo took the ridge, and Selene led the approach down the old forest road carved by trucks long forgotten. The facility emerged from the fog like a carcass. Gray walls, floodlights, security cams retrofitted to modern tech. Selene took out the 2 outer guards without a sound. Darnell cracked the side entrance with an old Echo code. They slipped inside. What they found chilled Selene to the bone. Cells, cold metal cells, some empty, some not. Inside one, a man stood slowly. His hair had gone gray, but Selena recognized him instantly. Callum Reyes, once her Echo team's tech specialist, presumed dead after an op in Moldova. Selene whispered his name. He blinked, disbelief written in every strained line of his face. "Carter? We're getting you out," she said. Behind her, Darnell worked fast, unlocking the doors one by one. Echo and Nova kept silent watch, though both were twitching with the scent of blood and cold steel. By the time the first alarms went off, they had 6 survivors moving. The fight wasn't clean. 3 armed guards responded within minutes. Selene took 2 down in a flurry of movement. Echo lunged for the 3rd. The man didn't even see the dog coming. They pushed through the rear exit and vanished into the trees, a trail of resistance winding behind them. Back at the compound, Reyes sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, sipping broth like a man waking from a nightmare. Selene knelt in front of him. "They told us you were gone." He shook his head slowly. "They needed me gone, because I knew where the kill switch was buried." Selene stilled. "The what?" Reyes leaned closer. "They built Echo Protocol with a failsafe, a command structure override. Someone has it, and they're still pulling strings." Selene looked at Darnell, then at Gina. The machine wasn't dead. It was hiding, and now they had the key to its heart. Chapter 11. The kill switch. The sky above the compound boiled with gray. Inside, silence reigned, thick, expectant. Celine stood with Callum Reyes beside the projector screen, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The kill switch wasn't just software, Reyes began, his voice still raw. It was a layered protocol, part hardware, part behavioral. He tapped the screen. A schematic appeared. Nodes, relays, old CIA architecture. At the center is a control node nicknamed Helix. Deep black, not on any public defense log, not even most internal ones. Gina leaned forward. Where is it? Callum exhaled. Fort Penrose. Darnell cursed under her breath. You've got to be kidding. Buried inside the fort's cold storage wing. They call it retired tech. It's not. It's active, hidden in plain sight. And if Helix is still live, then so is Echo. Celine stepped closer. Can it be shut down? Callum nodded slowly. Permanently, but not remotely. You'd have to reach the core server, physically disable the loop, pull it out by the roots. Darnell frowned. That place is crawling with active military and private security. You trip one alarm, they'll treat it as an act of war. Which is why we don't trip it, Celine said. Everyone turned to her. She looked calm, focused, deadly. We go in quiet, she said. One team, one shot. They planned it for 2 days. Schematics, shift rotations, server routes. Celine would go in with Nova and Echo. Reyes would guide from the outside, remotely unlocking gates through a back door he had built years ago. Gina would feed them real-time SAT intel. Darnell would manage extraction. The plan was simple, but the risk? Terminal. You know, Gina said softly the night before, once we pull this switch, we can't undo it. Celine nodded. Good. You sure you want to be the one to do it? I have to be, Celine said. It started with me. It ends with me. She looked at Nova and Echo, curled up beside her sleeping bag. They always knew the way. Fort Penrose loomed like a bunker out of time. Steel, concrete, surveillance towers, and a cold wind that never seemed to stop. They entered through the drainage culvert just after 200 hours. Reyes opened each checkpoint gate in perfect sync, every door unlocked with a quiet hiss, no alarms, no motion sensors tripped. Yet. Celine moved like a shadow. Nova and Echo flanked her, silent, alert. They reached sub-level 3, where cold storage began. It was freezing. Breath misted in the dark, rows of cryo units, locked filing drawers, hardline terminals abandoned by time but not by control. Helix sat behind a biometric vault door. Reyes whispered into her earpiece. Code's in. You've got 20 minutes before the security sweep. Celine reached the core. It was unassuming. A dark gray server, humming quietly, cables branching like arteries. She stared at it. This machine had run lives, ended them, fabricated guilt, protected the untouchable. She placed the drive Reyes had prepared into the primary port. The screen flickered. Override sequence initiated. Confirm termination? Yes. No. Celine didn't hesitate. She pressed yes. The fans screamed. The server sputtered. The cables hissed with heat. Then, silence. Total, absolute silence. Helix was dead. Echo protocol was over. But freedom never comes without consequence. Celine turned just in time to see the barrel of a rifle rising from the stairwell. She shouted, "Down!" As Echo lunged, the shot rang out. It hit the wall behind her. Celine fired twice. The assailant dropped. Military gear, no insignia. Nova barked once. Warning, more coming. Celine grabbed the kill drive, slung her rifle, and ran. Echo and Nova covered her rear as they darted through the corridor. "Extraction!" she shouted into comms. Darnell's voice was already barking instructions. "North stairwell! Roof access! Move now!" Celine didn't stop, not until the chopper's skids hit rooftop concrete and the team pulled her aboard. As they lifted into the night sky, she looked down at Fort Penrose shrinking behind them. The machine was off. But the fight? Far from over. Chapter 12. Aftershock. The sky was still dark when they returned to the compound, but Celine Carter knew the world had changed again. Fort Penrose's helix node had gone cold. The last nerve center of Echo Protocol, the invisible weapon, was dead, but in its place, echoes, ripples, aftershocks. Celine stood by the window in the operations room, watching the eastern horizon bleed orange. Her dogs, Nova and Echo, lay near her boots, still but alert, just like her. Behind her, Darnell and Gina were speaking in hushed tones. Callum Reyes sat in front of a monitor, his eyes heavy with too many memories and too little sleep. "No retaliation yet," Darnell said, "but we're being watched, quietly." "Always are," Celine replied, not turning around. Gina finally broke the silence. "The kill switch worked. We've confirmed it. The shadow nodes tied to Helix have gone dark. They can't spin operations anymore." Reyes leaned back. "That means it's done." Celine shook her head. "That means they're cornered, and that makes them desperate." By midday, it had begun. Anonymous leaks discrediting Celine started popping up online. Fabricated footage, old disciplinary reports, rewritten, a new narrative. Disgruntled SEAL turns rogue, compromises national security. But this time, Celine was ready. They fought fire with exposure. Gina counter-released the original Echo black site footage, unredacted. Celine uploaded her personal deployment logs from the last 5 years, cleared and time-stamped by Darnell's federal contacts. And Reyes? He dropped the name of a sitting U.S. senator whose signature was found on a buried Helix funding contract. That footage alone was viewed 40 million times in the first 24 hours. Yet that night, someone came for her. Not a drone strike, not a sniper, but something quieter and more insidious. A team breached the compound perimeter at 2:13 a.m. 4 men in tactical black. No markings, no hesitation. They came for Celine's room directly, but Nova and Echo were waiting. The first man didn't make it past the hallway. The second tripped the backup motion field Gina had quietly installed days ago. By the time the third man fired his first shot, Celine had him disarmed and unconscious, his weapon spinning across the tile. The fourth tried to flee. Echo brought him down in the woods before he could reach the fence. Celine stood over him, breathing heavy. He looked up at her, dazed and broken. "We were just following protocol," he whispered. She didn't even blink. "There is no protocol." In the aftermath, Darnell and her team secured the site and ran facial ID on the intruders. Private contractors. No government record, no known chain of command. Ghosts. "We flushed them," Gina muttered. "Now they're trying to erase the evidence by erasing you." Celine didn't answer. She was already packing. 2 days later, she stood in front of a courtroom, this time not as a defendant, not as a soldier, as a witness. The congressional inquiry had reached its boiling point. The pressure from the public, the international community, and Celine's own growing supporters had forced the government to act. She wore no uniform, just a black blazer, her hair tied back, her expression sharp. "I was told to follow orders," she said, voice steady. "But those orders protected war criminals. Those protocols turned soldiers into shadows. And I won't be silent for them anymore." When she returned to the compound that night, it was quiet again. Nova nudged her hand as she entered. Echo sat beside the couch, tail wagging softly. Celine sank into the chair, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she was holding all day. The world was still broken, but now it was watching. And maybe, just maybe, it had started listening. Chapter 13. Smoke and Mirrors. It had been 48 hours since Celine Carter testified before the Congressional Oversight Committee, but the storm hadn't passed. It had only changed direction. Instead of drones or bullets, they were facing something far more insidious. Disinformation. Anonymous sources began feeding headlines to national media outlets. Talk show panels debated Celine's credibility. Conspiracy forums accused her of staging the attacks for attention. One host even questioned whether Nova and Echo were trained to fake aggression. Celine didn't blink at any of it. She'd trained for chaos. But this was war by manipulation. "You know what this is," Darnell said, watching the news crawl across the screen. "It's their cleanup crew, psychological operations, classic smoke and mirrors." "They're trying to exhaust us," Gina muttered. "We keep exposing the truth, they just bury it under noise." Callum Reyes stood by the window, arms folded. "Then maybe it's time we cut through the noise." Celine turned to him. He nodded toward a file on the table. "I didn't tell you everything about Helix." That night, Celine read the file 3 times. Buried inside were encrypted logs from the early Echo days, before it went rogue. One entry stood out. Project Scarecrow blackmail-resistant protocol design, seeded into 5 intelligence agencies via false flag handshake. Failsafe embedded with biometric tag. "What the hell is this?" Darnell asked, scanning the file with wide eyes. Reyes answered without hesitation. Scarecrow was the nuclear option. If Echo was ever compromised from the inside, it would trigger mass exposure. Every secret tied to its funders, every ledger, every kill contract. Gina leaned forward. "And the biometric tag?" "Belonged to the project lead." Celine's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Reyes met her gaze. "You." Celine sat in stunned silence. "I never worked on this." "Not directly," Reyes said. "They used your DNA. When you were injured in that Yemen op, they harvested samples for recovery protocol, cloned them into Scarecrow's activation chain." "So they built the kill switch," Darnell said slowly, "into the one person they assumed would never turn. And now that person has," Gina added. Celine rose from her seat. "What happens if we trigger it?" Reyes hesitated. "Everything drops. Every document, every backup file, every dead drop. The truth detonates across every surveillance network, foreign and domestic." "No more shadow games," Celine said. "No more shadows," Reyes agreed. The team spent the next 24 hours preparing. Gina isolated a secure cloud node to absorb the surge. Darnell activated legal networks and whistleblower protections. Reyes coded in a staggered release, so the world wouldn't just see a dump of files, but a narrative, a clear timeline, a digital reckoning. At the center of it all stood Celine, not as a soldier, not as a ghost, but as the woman they had built the lie around, and who now held the detonator. At sunrise, she stood outside the compound. Nova sat beside her, Echo on her left. Behind her, the team waited. "I'm not doing this to burn the system," she said aloud, as if speaking to something higher than the sky. "I'm doing this so no one ever gets used the way we were." She pulled the activation key from her pocket, a tiny black capsule with a biometric scanner. One breath. Then she placed her thumb on the reader. Verified. Scarecrow initiated. Propagation sequence live. The air didn't shake. The sky didn't crack. But somewhere in data centers across the globe, truth woke up. Chapter 14. Reckoning. The world didn't explode, but it shifted. Just hours after Celine Carter triggered Scarecrow, the cracks began to show. Across encrypted networks, hidden drives, and buried archives, the detonation of truth had found its way to the surface. News outlets scrambled to verify the files. Anonymous accounts began dumping classified intel across every corner of the internet. From covert kill lists to laundering channels, ghost prisons to forged pardons, the rot of Echo Protocol was undeniable. There was no narrative to control. There was only reckoning. Inside the compound, Gina sat at her station, screen after screen lighting up with chaos. "New York Times just published the first article," she said. Guardian and Der Spiegel aren't far behind. Reuters is live streaming expert breakdowns. Reyes added, encrypted dark web chat rooms are exploding. Field agents are panicking. Some are going off-grid. Others are turning themselves in. Darnell leaned back, a bitter smile tugging at her mouth. You dropped a neutron bomb on their lies. Celine stood silently by the map table, watching the ripples fan out. This isn't a victory, she said. It's a reckoning. Back in Washington, hearings reignited, this time with teeth. New subpoenas, arrests, retired generals dragged from gated communities and forced to testify. The term echo became synonymous with institutional betrayal. But amid the storm, danger still circled. Some of the names on those files didn't plan to wait for justice. They planned revenge. 2 nights later, the attack came. Not covert, not surgical. A coordinated siege. 3 vehicles, armed mercenaries, high-caliber rifles, explosives. They hit the compound just after midnight. Celine was ready. Nova and Echo responded like they had trained for this moment since birth. Gina sealed the control room. Darnell took up position on the southern ridge. Reyes activated countermeasures, motion mines, perimeter alarms, drone scramblers. Celine moved through the smoke like a shadow. The first wave breached the fence. She dropped 2 in silence, disarming 1 before he could plant his charge. A third tried to flank. Echo took him down before he could shout. Nova tracked movement through the trees and lunged, dragging a rifleman into the dirt. Darnell's precision shots lit up the tree line. The fight lasted 11 minutes, then silence. The only sound was the low pant of the dogs and the cooling barrels of weapons. Celine stood in the middle of the smoke. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. They had tried to end her again. And failed. Again. When dawn came, the compound was scarred, but standing. So were they. This was their last move, Darnell said, wiping blood from her brow. No, Celine replied. It's their last denial. By mid-morning, international warrants were issued. Interpol, NATO intelligence, civil tribunals, no more sealed records, no more quiet retirements. The burn list wasn't a whisper anymore. It was law. And at the center of every headline, Celine Carter's name. The woman who defied the shadows. The dogs who never blinked. The reckoning that couldn't be stopped. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Celine knew there was still one name missing, one ghost who hadn't surfaced, someone who had always stayed one step ahead. And if the files were right, he was coming home. Chapter 15. Full Circle. The coordinates were burned into her mind. 47.9211 degrees north, 106.8348 degrees west. An abandoned military outpost, deep in the Montana wilderness, long decommissioned, officially forgotten, but the files said otherwise. The last command node tied to Echo Protocol's founder, an operative known only by his code name, Spectre. No real name, no photo, no record. But Celine Carter had always known he existed. Because he had trained her, she made the trip alone. Nova and Echo stayed behind for once, Gina's idea. Let the ghosts face each other, she said. The living need you here. The chopper dropped Celine a few miles out. She hiked the rest under cover of fog, memories clawing at her every step, desert missions, classified drills. That voice in the dark telling her who to trust, who to kill, and who to never ask questions about. That voice had belonged to Spectre, and now he would answer for what he built. The outpost was smaller than she remembered. Concrete, camouflaged, guardless, a single structure buried into the hillside. Celine entered quietly. Inside, dust, silence, and a single table. He was waiting, older, pale, weathered like war-torn steel, but his eyes, still sharp, still dangerous. You were always the best, he said without standing. Celine didn't answer. You shut it down, he continued. You did what no agency could. Celine took a slow step forward. Number, you did. I just cleaned up your mess. He smiled faintly. And now you've come to kill me? She shook her head. You're already dead. You just don't know it yet. He gestured to the chair opposite him. She didn't sit. Instead, she pulled a small device from her coat pocket. The last node, she said. Manual activation. You made sure even Scarecrow couldn't find you, but I did. Spectre's smile vanished. His hand moved under the table. Celine was faster. She slammed her boot on the table's edge, flipping it. The hidden pistol skidded across the floor. Her gun was out before he could breathe. Don't, she said, low and cold. He froze. You trained me to survive, she continued, but you never expected I'd outgrow you. He lowered his hand. So this is justice? No, Celine said. This is closure. She tossed the activation drive at his feet. Press the button yourself, or I will. He stared at the drive. For the first time, his expression cracked. Not fear, not regret, but resignation. Slowly, he knelt, picked up the drive, and pressed it to his chest. The red light blinked. Long-buried servers lit up. Back doors collapsed. The last echo shadow died. Celine left him there. She didn't look back. 2 weeks later, a monument was erected outside D.C., a plain black stone engraved with names of operatives who'd gone missing during Echo Protocol's reign. It bore no flags, no titles, but near the top, one name stood out. Celine Carter, the ghost that spoke the truth. She didn't attend the unveiling. She didn't want praise. She wanted peace. Back at the compound, she walked the perimeter at dawn. Nova trotted beside her, tail up, tongue out. Echo sat by the gate, calm and steady. The war was over. The ghosts had scattered. But Celine Carter was still here, standing, watching, alive. The end echoes of truth.